can help improve that. Now, something that she also said, be prepared for college administrators, because they're not always going to be supportive. And that, unfortunately, that's a harsh reality. Now, according to Anne-Marie Rocco, Jerry August, and Meg Kennedy in their books, Safe Spaces, Making Schools and Communities Welcoming to LGBTQ Youth, it said because of negative uses of the word gay is so ambiguous amongst adolescents, many teachers fail to realize how bigoted and damaging this language is when they do nothing to address homophobic rhetoric based on the message that this speech is acceptable. So silence is acceptance, is what that is saying. If you don't do anything, it's okay. Colleagues say inappropriate comments, they bully students, and parents are opposed to LGBTQ, as we heard from the Brookfield Central example. Subject area can improve examples in classes. So I talked about the math example, how having a stats unit on LGBTQ statistics rather than housing rates. And then within the Spanish classroom, English classroom, they include text and people in just everyday stuff. And it doesn't have to be this big old unit like I mentioned before. It can be very small stuff, even just within questions that answer our tests. Now, I also interviewed Robin Fox on November 4th. And again, we see this recurring theme of GSAs or gay straight alliances in high school. And we just heard a couple of statistics of how gay straight alliances had helped improve the climate of schools. Now, she attends student teaching seminars, which a lot of education majors go to, and they're required to go to while they're student teaching. And she talks about LGBTQ non-traditional families. So it's having a working knowledge is what she really wants LGBTQ, or teachers to understand about LGBTQ students, or even their families who are LGBTQ. So having lesbian parents, to male parents, having a transgender parent, having a working knowledge, talking to students and how they should identify that. And having those respect for those come out because it's a very different journey than someone who is straight. And embrace the strength of that student because sometimes this is the most difficult thing to come out. So in secondary and primary schools, using the different language. I talked about earlier about using date instead of husband, or a lot of those examples. Instead of using he or she within an example, using the word they, or using neutral words instead of identifying those male, female, and that's it. Because as we talked about earlier, the people can choose to identify in any way they feel that they can identify. Now there are resources available. The Equality Council, which works with families specifically with LGBTQ youth and LGBTQ parents who might be two lesbian parents or anything in between. So using those resources available to you, reading the paper about LGBTQ issues in the world, because those that affect those types of students differently than those who are straight. And the HRC is known as Human Rights Campaign. Now, I brought an example of something that the Human Rights Campaign distributes every year called the Corporate Equality Index. So what that is knowing what corporations are LGBTQ friendly. This may not be directly applied to the classroom, but in a secondary education classroom, some of your students are not just going to go to school right away. They're going to go to work before they go to school, or they're going to get a job to get through college. So they might want to know, what companies can I work for that will be accepting of that? Inclusive language and artifacts. So within the Com 424 class, we talk about artifacts being very powerful. We have a lot of artifacts within our own society. So pictures, posters, all those sorts of things. So having those artifacts up around your office, if you get the luxury of having an office, or around your desk of a safe zone plaque and posters about LGBTQ space, because students will notice that if they're in your classroom every day. Sometimes your students are going to get bored, it's going to happen, and they're going to look around and they're going to come to ceiling tiles, It's going to happen. And a lot of teachers get bulletin boards, putting out across their bulletin boards. They're going to know those things, and they're going to figure it out sooner or later that you're gay, or that you're supportive of that community, and they're going to feel safe talking to you. Now, in a perfect world, Dr. Fox would like students to go through LGBTQ issues training and basic understanding LGBTQ issues and laws and literature. So in a perfect world, of taking the self-initiative. So training and laws being, well, currently in Wisconsin, LGBTQ people cannot get married legally in Wisconsin. So it's knowing those brief understanding of those things, of the issues, the laws, and literature. And we talked a lot about the issues of students in the high school. So transgender individuals have a higher statistic of being bullied than those who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual. But knowing those issues are very important because at least you have a leg to stand on. Now, during education seminars and presentations, Dr. Fox wants those student teachers and those who are going to be teachers to ask questions and a place to understand how to make an inclusive classroom. Because if you don't know something, ask. And those seminars, in those panels that go to education classes, are there so you can learn about those individuals and their experiences, so you know how to identify those things in a secondary education classroom. Now, Ronald Botnick, who's the principal of Milwaukee School of Languages, which we talked about earlier, he identified what can teachers do for students. He wants them to know how to interact with LGBTQ students and insights gained with sexuality and sexual identity. But he also wants to know how to keep that professional distance, but empathize with the kid and be professional. So what he's saying is he wants teachers to know how to interact with students appropriately without crossing a line. So we hear those stories all the time in the news saying a teacher took a student off campus without a permission slip, or had interacting with students very inappropriately. He does not want that to happen. He wants teachers to be there in a professional manner, but still be able to help the student if that's who they feel comfortable with. Now, this is, again, we talk about safer schools. Now, this is according to Killian Kendra and why we need a GSA. With this GSA, the members of Hamilton High School, which is in Wisconsin, the GSA decided that they were fed up with anti-gay remarks in the hallways. With the help of a grant from the school district, they designated a classroom post that read, "I just heard you say that's okay." What I think it meant was, and give us additives like ridiculous, silly, absurd, foolish. But she has this poster in the Pride Resource Center at here at UW Whitewater. And so now those students gave the poster to every teacher in the school, and after the posters went out, the students said that so gay language actually decreased within their school. Now, as a teacher, what can teachers do ultimately? They can try to help start a GSA. There's over 37 in Wisconsin, most of them being in southeastern Wisconsin. Now, this statistic changes just about every day because we're seeing more and more GSAs get started. This was the most recent statistic I could find. And let's save some programs in the school district, so save some for students and save some for staff. For students, it can start as young as second grade. There's currently a teacher in Chicago that had a safe zone training program for students, for those who are in second grade, to understand these issues. And if you're exposed to that all through your schooling, it's not going to be weird. Then using inclusive language, being supportive in students, but also knowing how to address other faculty and staff. Because as we talked about earlier, they can't be the problem themselves. They can be the ones bullying students. They can be the one calling students unnecessary within classroom and bring unwanted attention to those students. So knowing how to combat those individuals and being the advocate, being the ally for them. That's what Dr. Foster really wants teachers to be able to do. Now there's a variety of resources that are available to teachers. For the Trevor Project, with the suicide prevention and 24-hour hotline for students, we saw that example of grasping within Glee of how he tried to commit suicide. There's a prevention hotline for students who are LGBTQ or any other identity that can call and just as someone to talk to. Teaching tolerance is why we need a GSA. It's an example of, there's a lot of statistics within that article of how students can, of how GSA helps students within their high schools. Gleason, which I've been referencing a lot through this whole presentation, they have a lot of different resources available. I've been referencing their climate survey, but they have the Gleason lunchbox from 1999, as I referenced earlier, which this is a perfect example in what it mentions of how to conduct trainings with staff, how to implement LGBTQ issues or events within the classroom. It's perfect. It's a great example. It gives examples of an hour training, 2-hour trainings, 3-day trainings with staff of how to incorporate those LGBTQ issues within the classroom and provide safe zone training. The Wisconsin Department of Instruction also has a lot of resources available online for free to teachers if they want to conduct safe zone trainings. If they don't have access to these great resources like Gleason of the lunchbox, the Wisconsin Department of Instruction offers those different resources for teachers for free in their online seminars. So it's not like you have to go to somewhere to take these seminars. You can do it online. Now, this is copied and pasted from the Wisconsin Department of Instruction, a safe school for all, how to build a multi-layered bullying prevention program. Now, I'm not going to go over every single thing here, because as you can see, there's a lot of different resources for teachers to talk about these different issues. The organized days where boys go to classrooms and bully pre-identified students. So having that already set up and seen, so other people is kind of microwaves for other students to know, oh, that's how they feel? So another example that's on here is delete day, a day where students delete bullying messages from the Facebook page. Because these students, as we saw earlier, don't have support from their teachers. So having a day where that's exactly what they do, they're going to delete those messages. Now, unfortunately, that might not erase them emotionally, but at least they can feel empowered to delete those messages. Tackling peer pressure. At Jefferson High School, they have something called the STAR program, which is an acronym for Students Talking About Respect. Now, that may not be LGBTQ focused, but it's respect focused. So those are all the resources that are available for teachers when we talk about LGBTQ issues. Now, my question for anyone is if you have questions about how to combat these issues, or if you have any questions about anything I talked about during this presentation about LGBTQ students.
Well, the first one's kind of like a question / comment. The first teacher you mentioned in your primary research where she said she didn't really think there was problems in the classroom, do you think it's possible that there were problems, she's just not aware of the issues and the stuff that they are faced with?
Yes, I actually do think that there probably were problems with, in the classroom, but she might not have been faced with them. She is a business education teacher, so she has a lot of, students are behind computers for most of the classes, and there just might be issues that she's unaware of because they didn't feel that they could come out to her or trust her, or she just didn't know. At that point in Jefferson High School, that was part of the old high school, and her classroom specifically was very isolated. So it was definitely a trip to go down there. And I know I can speak from experience with this teacher that there were problems within the school district that she didn't know about. I talked about earlier with the Spanish teacher that they tried to start a GSA, but they were shot down by administration. Good question. Oh, yeah, more? Sure.
There was a graph chart about the statistics of sexual orientation and verbal abuse, I think. I'm not entirely sure. Did that include people who identify as heterosexuals? And do you think that if those people were excluded, do you think more than approximately 67% of the people interviewed, do you think that number would be higher?
That statistic did not include those who are heterosexual. So that only includes those who are LGBTQ. Does that answer the question?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any more?
It's not really a question.
If you have anything to say, go for it.
Oh,
I just think it's sad when people are verbally abused, physically assaulted, because even people who are extroverts are really kind of confident in who they are. Their self-image or concept takes into consideration what other people say or feel about them. So when they constantly hear people using derogatory language, I don't expect them to feel anything else but being helpless and the feeling that they have that they don't really deserve to live. So, yeah.
Right, and we definitely talked about this earlier of the different statistics involved with those who were more than likely to commit suicide because of not feeling safe or the harassment, physical abuse and assault that they encountered. Are there any other questions, whether it's LGBTQ individuals in general or those in high schools? Yeah.
Do you believe that your ultimate goal is to lower these statistics, and also do you think that that begins with educating teachers, or is that an issue that needs to be tackled from every possible angle, such as educating students and society?
So my goal here is more for awareness. It's not to bring these statistics down. I think when we have to start somewhere before we can make these dramatic changes, as Rome was not built in a day. So where David, you had mentioned that commenting this at different angles. That's why I do think that this needs to come from educating teachers, but then also educating students, because eventually those students are going to grow up and take our spots. So if you start with at the student realm, and if they are exposed consistently to these messages and to these concepts throughout their whole high school career, hopefully there's some at least tolerance, if not acceptance, of these individuals, and there'll be less of those high alarming statistics of those not feeling safe in schools. And then also starting top down, so educating educators, so then they can educate the students. So it's being shot at all angles as well, but also those educators that are educated, them being advocates for other LGBTQ individuals, not actually just students, but other people, because as we heard earlier, that administrators are not always as welcoming, and they have to come at those individuals as well. So it's coming at all angles. Good question. Yeah.
This one's just more of your opinion. Social media, in regards to that aspect, do you think it's more beneficial or more negative? Negative in the sense that it allows bullies to attack the people that they're targeting on a very open scale where a lot of people can see their comments? Or do you think it's more beneficial to the people getting bullied because it provides them with more networks that can possibly be supportive?
That's difficult. So, and here's my opinion. We saw that statistic earlier of the alarming high messages that are sent over social media or in electronic forms, text messages. Having on social media is very multi-layered. It can help them or harm them, as is within your question. I think it's helpful because you can within Facebook or some of the different media platforms, you can identify and talk with these people about how you're feeling. And you can have people who you can talk to, even though you might feel lonely in school, there's those students that go home and go on Facebook and talk to the students and get a support network for them. Although, as we saw from that example from Glee, that can be just as harmful because people can attack you in an open forum. And people who you normally don't talk to on a normal basis see those comments, that they can start to form negative opinions about you as well. So, I guess it's not really a true answer. I personally think that it's beneficial because you have the networks. That's a personal opinion. Are there any other questions or comments? Awesome. Well, that's what I'm going to conclude at. I'm going to, because I've been quite show. So here are the different resources that are that were used within this presentation. Now, if there are any other questions, don't be afraid to email me or call me. Also, you have my number in some checkboard form or my email. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. This has helped quite a bit. I hope you got value out of this presentation. Thank you.